The media narrative is a calculated distraction focused on kinetic theater, missile launches, tank columns. As seen in protracted conflicts now exceeding 418 days, conventional warfare is a strategy of attrition, not victory. The real vector is silent. The primary target is not a city. It is the solvency of the system itself. The objective is no longer military conquest. It is systemic insolvency. RIUSI analysis confirms that over 95% of global data traffic, the digital lifeblood of the financial system, travels through a handful of vulnerable undersea cables. These are not military targets. They are economic choke points. Severing these is not an act of war. It is an act of economic execution. The second front is orbital. As artificial intelligence reshapes the battle space, the reliance on satellite networks for command, control, and navigation becomes a critical point of failure. Adversaries are not preparing to shoot down satellites, a high-cost, high-signature event. CSIS reports detail the development of protocols for non-kinetic dazzling and blinding, creating digital blackouts on demand. This strategy creates the blind Leviathan, a military superpower rendered inert, its digital eyes gouged out, and its nervous system severed. It possesses unmatched kinetic force, but lacks the data stream to target, to communicate, or to process its own treasury functions. This is the asymmetric response. The threat is not a launch on warning. It is the silence that follows when the entire system goes dark. The motive is not conquest. The motive is mathematical survival. When a weaker actor is trapped in a protracted conventional conflict, its own internal solvency begins to fracture. The war itself becomes the primary domestic liability, a political and economic accelerant for regime collapse. This is not a theory, it is a blueprint for desperation. CSIS analysis on the Russian Federation frames this with terrifying clarity. After 418 days of high kinetic cost, a duration now equal to the Nazi-Soviet front, the war is no longer a foreign policy instrument. It is a domestic liability draining the state. As data from Euromaidan Press confirms, without a grand coalition on the ground, attritional warfare against a Western-backed opponent is a zero-sum game you are guaranteed to lose. This forces a strategic pivot. When victory is impossible, the objective shifts from winning the battle to threatening the solvency of the entire enemy system. This is asymmetric escalation. The playbook is openly declared, when Tehran states it will hit back at adversaries if attacked. Per Al Jazeera, it is not threatening a conventional response. It is signaling a direct attack on systemic choke points, shipping lanes, financial markets, energy infrastructure. The perceived weakness of the target system is the launch-on warning signal. Internal fractures are an invitation. When the Department of Justice subpoenas the Federal Reserve, as reported by Fox8Live.com, it signals deep systemic stress. For an adversary, this is not background noise. It is a targeting vector. It confirms the system is brittle and susceptible to a solvency attack. The strategy, therefore, is to create a direct vector from a conventional stalemate to systemic collapse. The war is reframed as a solvency crisis. The goal is no longer to destroy an army, but to trigger a liquidity crisis in the adversary's homeland, leveraging new tools, like AI-driven warfare, as noted by The Hill, to execute the attack at a fraction of the kinetic cost. You don't have to win the fight if you can make your enemy's entire system insolvent. The entire economic model of conventional warfare has been inverted. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, documents the core mathematical problem. A state actor invests $5 million into a main battle tank, a kinetic asset representing decades of industrial base power. The counterparty deploys a $500 drone, often assembled from commercial components. The resulting exchange is not a battle, it is an arbitrage of lethality. This is the democratization of violence. The migration of nation-state level destructive capability to non-state actors at consumer prices. The strategy is no longer to defeat an army, but to impose a systemic solvency crisis. Each destroyed tank is not a tactical loss. It is a direct strike against the treasury and the industrial capacity of the target system, creating an attritional death spiral. The objective is economic liquidation, executed with kinetic tools. The destabilization of regional hubs is not chaos. It is a blueprint. The warnings for citizens in nations like South Africa are not the story. They are the symptom of a gray zone activation. These zones are proxy laboratories designed to stress test the breaking points of the current global system. This protocol is triggered by a simple calculation. Prolonged conventional attrition exposes systemic weakness. The war in Ukraine has now surpassed the 1,418-day duration of the Nazi-Soviet front, but without a WW2-style coalition on the ground. This extended kinetic output creates a verifiable drain on Western military and financial solvency, a signal visible to every adversary. That signal of weakness is now being met with an asymmetric response. State actors like Iran openly declare they will hit back if attacked, leveraging the threat of regional chaos as a deterrent. This is not a bluff. It is a calculated strategy based on the perception that the system can no longer afford another full-scale conflict. The true vulnerability, however, is not kinetic. It is financial. As military resources are depleted, the core economic architecture shows unprecedented fractures. According to reports, the Department of Justice has subpoenaed the Federal Reserve, threatening indictment. This is not a political dispute. It is a declaration of internal war over the system's solvency. This intersection of perceived military overextension and internal financial decay creates the mathematical incentive for asymmetric escalation. According to analysts at CSIS and RUSI, adversaries no longer need to defeat an army. They only need to threaten the system's liquidity. The gray zone is where they rehearse. The future of war, as outlined in reports from the Hill, is being reshaped by artificial intelligence, which lowers the cost of entry for these systemic attacks. The vector is no longer from battlefield to battlefield. The vector now runs directly from a regional stalemate to a global solvency crisis. This is a mathematical certainty. The next phase will not be fought with tanks, but with algorithms targeting financial choke points. The core of the nuclear dilemma is no longer about intent. It is about protocol. We must analyze the launch-on warning doctrine. Per RUSI analysis, this is not a strategy but a pre-programmed response. When early warning systems detect an incoming first strike, a retaliatory launch is triggered before impact. The objective is to ensure the adversary cannot achieve a decapitation strike, thus making the first move a zero-sum calculation for all parties. The systemic liability is not the missile. It is the radar. The doctrine's integrity is entirely dependent on infallible data from its sensor network. This creates a new asymmetric vector of attack, the fog of digital war. A hostile actor does not need to launch a kinetic strike. They only need to blind the system with a targeted cyber attack. In this scenario, the commander is presented with a binary choice, stripped of strategic nuance. The screen is black. Is it a system malfunction, or is it the prelude to impact in T-minus 12 minutes? The protocol has no variable for uncertainty. It only recognizes signal or no signal. To not launch is to gamble national solvency on the hope that the blindness is a temporary glitch. To launch is to follow the mathematical certainty of the protocol. This is the ultimate asymmetric leverage, forcing your adversary's own logic to become their primary liability. A well-placed piece of malware forces a kinetic choice. As analysts have noted, artificial intelligence is reshaping the future of war, and this is its most direct application, threatening systemic collapse without firing a single shot. The thesis is not theoretical. It is a mathematical certainty. Prolonged kinetic attrition, as documented in the 1,418-day grind of the Russia-Ukraine war, forces a strategic pivot. When conventional victory is impossible, the objective shifts from defeating an army to bankrupting the system that funds it. The perceived weakness is the accelerant. Current intelligence, referencing the Department of Justice subpoena against the Federal Reserve, signals unprecedented internal fragility. This is not a domestic political issue, it is a global broadcast of systemic vulnerability. Adversaries, from state actors like Iran to non-state proxies, now have a clear incentive model. The playbook, according to analysts at CSIS, is asymmetric escalation. The weapon is not a missile. It is an algorithm. The future of war, as detailed in recent reports, is autonomous and artificially intelligent, designed for maximum disruption with zero attribution. The goal is to introduce a catastrophic liability into the balance sheet of the adversary. Therefore, the calibration forecast for the next 12 months is not a port blackout or a grid failure. The kinetic cost is too high, the attribution too easy. The vector will be financial and digital. Expect a multi-hour, unexplained outage of the Fedwire Fund Service. It will be positioned as a technical glitch or a failed systems update. It will not be attributed to Iran or any other actor. The event's purpose is not to cause lasting damage, but to serve as a calibration shot. A direct demonstration of the ability to halt US dollar liquidity at will. It is a mathematical warning shot, threatening the solvency of the entire system.